You're listening to This Is My Side Hustle. The tips, tools, and advice you need to optimize your life live here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to additional income by engineering your choices around your ideal lifestyle, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join us as we unpack unconventional ideas and methods to give you more freedom and flexibility. Let's escape the rat race together and live with intention. Let's learn how others are making it pay with their side hustles. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of This Is My Side Hustle. Today, we're going to be talking about FIRE, what it is, what it means, and the basic tenets that you need to know in order to achieve it. So FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And I'm all for financial independence, but I'm not so sure I enjoy the thought of retiring early. In fact, retiring to me sounds like the beginning of a slow death. So I do love the financial independence movement that's going on. And while I support other people's decisions to retire early, I do think that it makes sense to think about what you're going to do when you get to the point where you can retire, but still continue to do something that gives you purpose, something that you do to give back, sharing your knowledge with others, or still working at least on a part-time basis. I can't imagine what I would do with my time if I simply had a bunch of free time and no purpose or nothing I was working towards or contributing to. So that's kind of my own take on the retire early movement, but I love financial independence. So we're going to dig into that today. And I want to give you kind of what it means and some basic calculations and how you can get started on your own financial independence journey. So what you need to first know about how much you're going to need in order to be financially independent is to take your current annual expenses, so how much you need to live on, and multiply it by 25. So that's kind of called the 4% rule. Let's say you need $40,000 per year to cover your living expenses. And some people might go with a bare bones kind of starting point, but I suggest you put a little bit of margin in there because you also need to take into consideration perhaps long-term care, health insurance costs if you do decide to retire from your current job and you'll need to cover your own healthcare expenses. But let's just say $40,000 per year are your expenses. So $40,000 a year would be $3,333 per month that you would need to live on for the rest of your life. So you would multiply $40,000 by 25, which is $1 million. What that means is when you have $1 million saved, and I'm not talking about non-liquid assets here, like a house. I'm talking about $1 million in maybe a mix of index funds and rental income. Once you get $1 million, you could literally stop adding to the pot and draw 4% of that every year to cover your expenses. You would be financially independent at $1 million. So this number varies from person to person. If you're a single person and you own your home and you have low taxes and you live in a low cost of living area and you have a paid off car, or perhaps you don't even have a car, you bike or you use the bus, and you could get by on $12,000 a year, which is doable in certain areas of this country and is definitely doable if you know how to manage your money and you're a single person. Well, you would multiply $12,000 by 25. If you could and wanted to live that kind of lifestyle for the rest of your life, you could be financially independent with only $300,000. Meaning if you have $300,000 right now, you could draw 4% of that and live on $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year. It also would be more realistic if you live in a place like Mexico or something. So you really have to think outside the box here. You have to look at what are you comfortable with living on per month, and how can you reduce your expenses to the point where you're spending as little as possible and saving as much as possible in order to build up that amount of your financial independent number. It really will vary. Some people, might only feel comfortable on $100,000 a year. If you need that and want that for the rest of your life, then you're going to need $2.5 million to retire. That would be your financial independence number. So it really varies from person to person. It's very personal. Some people might think, well, I'm never going to be able to make or save up $1 million. The thing is you can actually do it pretty quickly if you're really willing to take a look at some big ticket items and scale down. The biggest of these is housing. If you can figure out a way to house hack and maybe sell your current home and live in an apartment, or sell your home and buy a duplex or a triplex, and you live in one part and have the other person pay your mortgage, well, you've just house hacked and you would have very, very low housing costs. Other things you can do, that's a big one. Housing is obviously a big one. Other things you can take a look at is how much are you spending on groceries every month? If you're spending more than $600 or $700 for a family of 4, you're spending way too much on groceries. So consider meal planning, going to Aldi's, pairing up a Amex Blue card, which gives you 6% back on your groceries, with Aldi or Walmart, and figuring out how you can reduce your recurring necessary costs as much as possible. Another big ticket item that people could instantly reduce their expenses with is usually cars. So if you have 2 cars and you're paying payments on both of them, or even worse, leasing them, please do not lease your cars. It is absolutely one of the worst decisions you could make. If you can downsize your vehicles, take a look at how you can do that. Buy a couple, maybe 2 or 3 year old car that has really good Consumer Reports ratings on it, and is known to run forever. A couple that come to mind are Hondas, Toyotas, and Subarus. If you can get yourself in a Honda, Toyota, or Subaru, or if you have a truck, if you can get a diesel truck, these things will last a lot longer. Now, my husband and I have bought cars most of the time that were several years old or even 10 years old, and ran them just fine, and either came out almost even or actually made money after using the car for quite a while. Because we've been okay with buying older vehicles most of the time, and I'm gonna tell you a more recent story and tell you why we chose to do something like this. But if you can do something like that and get your costs down on vehicles, it's something that gets really good gas mileage, you're going to come out a lot farther, and you can put the car payments towards your retirement or your nest egg or your financial independent number. Funnel that away and put it in some Vanguard VSTAX funds, low cost index funds. So anything you can do like that with the big items is fantastic. And then, of course, cut everything out of your budget that you do not need. You do not need to go to Starbucks every day. And I know everyone uses that as an example, but it's true. If you're spending $4, which is pretty much usually the minimum you're going to spend at Starbucks every single day, you're spending $1,400, over $1,400 in a year, every single year. 10 years without even earning interest, that's almost $15,000 of something that's really not necessary. If you are dead set on drinking your Starbucks, then you've got to find a way to shave off money in other areas. Okay, so figure out another way that you're going to save $120 a month. But really think about the long term of little daily expenditures that add up. Another thing you can look at is your utility costs. When my husband and I first bought our home, our average electric bill from the previous person who owned it, and keep in mind, our house was empty. So he had owned the house for several years before he put it on the market. He had grown up in this home, and the utility bills just for the electric was $130 for an empty house. And we came in and we removed a huge expenditure. There was a light at the end of our driveway that was up on a telephone pole that we got rid of, and that immediately shaved off about $20 a month. It was one of those huge lights, and I think he put it in for security reasons, but we decided we really didn't need that. We also immediately went around and replaced every single light bulb in our home with a LED light bulb, and we do have a couple fluorescents in our garage, those big long tube fluorescents in our garage and in our basement, but those really don't add up very much, and we very rarely have those on anyway. But by doing that, we shaved off another, I think, $20 or $30 per month. So one of the best things you can do is go ahead and invest in those LED bulbs. I think we've only had one LED bulb in 4 years now that we've had to replace, and it was one that we pretty much had on almost all the time. Our front porch light we have on, overnight all the time, but we haven't had to replace anything else. They last forever. They don't get hot, so you don't have to worry about the excess heat, and they use very, very little electricity. I also don't have any lights on during the day when I'm at home, and we unplug things from the wall. Even if something's plugged in, it's still drawing electricity. So anytime I'm done using an appliance, such as the coffee maker or our blender or something like that, I unplug it immediately. I always unplug my computer when it gets to 100%, and I let it go down so that I'm not constantly using that energy. We also have our Wi-Fi plugged into a timer, and it automatically turns off at night and turns back on in the morning. So we're saving on that, and we're also not real keen on the idea of Wi-Fi being pumped through our house while we're sleeping. There's been some studies that show that is really not healthy. So when we're not going to be using it, we turn it off, and it's set on a timer so we don't even have to think about it. So those are just some ideas of ways you can scale down your expenses. Anything in your car that you might be carrying around that is unneeded, take it off. For instance, don't drive your car around with a bike rack on it, or even a roof rack. You can usually remove roof racks. Anything that's adding more weight, take it off. Learn how to drive a little better. If you have a newer car that shows you your average miles per gallon, keep an eye on that as you're driving, and be aware of how your sudden starts and stops can affect your gas mileage. Any little thing you can do, it'll really add up over the course of even a month or two, let alone a year or several years. You'll be surprised. So I actually have 52 small tweaks a week you can make to save more money in a special download, and you'll even get weekly emails with it. So if you want to grab that, go to makingitpaytostay.com/save, and I'll send you an email every single week of a tweak you can do. And after the 52nd one, if you want to re-sign up and do it all over again, you can. Sometimes we need reminders. So I actually signed up for it myself to remind me of these things on a weekly basis, because sometimes you can get complacent. And especially when you start to get to a comfortable point in your finances and you're making good money and you're saving a lot, It's pretty easy to start getting back into old habits of spending here and there when you really don't need to. So go ahead and take a look at some of that. Another thing I wanted to mention is a lot of people look into investing in real estate and having rentals, whether you're house hacking and sharing a duplex or whether you are buying rental properties. The financial independent number actually goes up a little for rentals. So I'm going to give you two little calculations you need to know when purchasing a rental and when deciding to hang on to it for somewhat passive income in your retirement years. So the first one is the 1% rule for buying a rental property. Now, the 1% rule means that you need to be able to charge 1% of the purchase price per month to your tenants. So if you purchase a rental home for $100,000, you need to make sure that it is realistic and acceptable and fair market value to charge $1,000 per month for that rental. So in our area, that would probably be a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, single-family home, something probably around 1,200 square feet or less, without any fancy upgrades. We could easily get $1,000 per month. Now, let's say you decided to buy something a little more expensive, maybe $200,000, then you need to at least have 3 bedrooms, 2 baths in a nice neighborhood in order to get $2,000 for that. You need to take into consideration also when you buy that house, how much you're going to need to put into it for it to be livable and decent. So you will probably have an inspector come in and a general contractor to give you some ideas. This would be during your due diligence phase. So you would get under contract first, and then you would have your 10 days or whatever it is in your state to have a general contractor come in and an inspector and let you know the various costs involved. So if you're going to look at buying a $100,000 house and it requires $30,000 to get it up to code and be livable, then you're going to need to be able to charge $1,300 in rent. So you need to also do some research on what the rentals are going for in your area, what's acceptable, and what people are willing to pay, because your all-in cost then is going to need to still fit into that 1% rule. So that is your basic rule, your calculation for buying a rental property. You also need to know, just in addition to that, for rental properties, you're going to need to have at least 20% down. You very rarely, unless you're doing some kind of owner financing deal or have investors, you're going to need to be able to get 20% down in order to get a mortgage on that second property. Since it's not a primary residence, you are also going to have a little bit of a higher interest rate for that. So don't expect to get a 3.5% interest rate on a rental property. It's probably not going to happen. And also you're going to need to get some kind of an umbrella policy for insurance for that. You don't necessarily need to put it in an LLC, especially if you're just getting started and you only want 1 or 2 properties, but you're going to need to make sure you get sufficient insurance on that. So those are some things you need to know before you buy a rental property. And then for retirement, the 4% rule is what I use for index funds and the stock market. The 6% rule is what you need to know for what your total assets are in rental properties. You can usually get 6% through rent after costs for retirement income purposes. So if you have, let's say, $200,000 in rental homes, for example, you have 2 houses, they're worth $100,000, so $200,000 each, then you can expect to get $12,000 per year or $1,000 per month from those. So that's the 6% rule. So if you have a portfolio when you're ready to retire of, let's say $800,000, and you have $200,000 in rental property assets that are being actively rented out, you can hit your financial independence number that way. So you don't need to just go through one or the other. You can do a mixture, which is what most people end up doing by the time they are financially independent. And that's the way they get their income. So they have the 4% from their investments in the stock market, and they have their 6% from investments in real estate. So those are some numbers I just wanted to give to you. This is just basically touching the tip of the iceberg here. There is, like I said earlier, a huge movement about financial independence. So I wanted to share with you some of my favorite books and some of my favorite podcasts, if this is something that you're interested in delving into a little deeper. And I do think that side hustles can help you get your FI number much more quickly. And the more streams of income you have, the faster you can funnel all of that extra into investments and save, or pay off debt first. So before I go into the books and the podcasts, I just want to give you some examples of maybe the steps you should take when you decide, okay, this is something I want to do. I want to get to, I want to be financially independent as much as I can, as quickly as I can. Then you want to follow some steps first. So before you start putting all of your extra money into low-cost index funds, you want to first pay down any debt aggressively, especially if it's over 5% interest. So any debts you may have that are over 5% interest, pay those off as quickly as possible. Now, Dave Ramsey recommends you start with your smallest debt and pay that off, and then your next debt and your next debt, regardless of interest rate. And he calls this the debt snowball. I actually disagree with this. I think the math just doesn't make sense. I understand the emotional wins it gives to people, but when you look at the numbers, it really just doesn't make sense. It's more advantageous for you to pay off your highest interest rates first, even if it takes a long time, because those are the ones that are costing you the most. So if you're a Dave Ramsey lover, and believe me, there's a lot that I love about what Dave Ramsey said. He's helped a lot of people, but there's some things that I don't agree with. I go into this in a blog post, and you can find that at makingitpaytostay.com/dr. D for Dave, R for Ramsey. That's makingitpaytostay.dr. You can go ahead and take a look at that and see kind of where I agree with Dave and where I disagree. But you want to use something called a debt avalanche, which is paying off your highest interest rate debts first and then working your way down. So if you have car loan rates that are in 7%, or if you have a lease, get rid of that lease as quickly as possible, or wait until it's up and then never do that again. But if you have a used car loan at 7% or 6% even, you want to pay that down. If you've got student loans over 5%, pay that down immediately. The reason I use this 5% rule, this rule of thumb of 5%, is because most of the time, you're looking at a 6% return in low-cost index funds over the long term. Now, that might not be the case for a year or two or even 5 years, but over the course of 5 to 10 years, it's usually right around 6% or more, but 6% as a minimum. So you're going to be better off aggressively paying down any kind of consumer debt or any other debt that you have over 5%, which is basically most debts except for a mortgage. Now, we're in a situation where our mortgage is around 4.1%. So we pay extra on our mortgage, and we're probably going to be paying that off in just a few years. But I also don't want to put all of my money into my house, which is at 4.1%, when we're also at a young enough point where we're not quite that close to retirement, but we still have some years of compounding interest that we would be missing out on to just not invest in the stock market. So you can kind of make that call. Obviously, it feels amazing to pay off your house. You can then use your mortgage payments to then invest. But as far as your mortgage goes, if you've got a fixed rate and you don't have a variable rate or some kind of two mortgages or what's it called? Line of equity or line of credit, home equity line of credit. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. If you have just a fixed rate mortgage and it's under 5%, you can make the call on that. If you're an emotional person and you know that just not having that payment will make you feel really good, go ahead and pay off your house. If you are more of a math person, logical person, and you want to maybe do a little bit of both, invest while you're paying down your house and putting extra payments towards that, then do that. I kind of like the middle of the road option for this, just because, like I said, I don't want to miss out on some of those years I could be earning compounding interest. So those are some more helpful tips for you. But I did want to get into some books that I think you will really, really enjoy. And I really feel like they're a must read for everyone. The first book that I want to recommend for you to read is Your Money or Your Life. This really helps you take a look at the cost opportunities of your time versus working at a job, which is a reason I think I really push getting a side hustle or working from home or creating your own business or engineering your income to match your lifestyle is because you cannot renew time. Every single second that you're listening to this podcast is a second you're losing in your life. And I hope I'm providing value, and I hope this is worth your time, and perhaps you're doing something else that you need to be doing, like housework or driving in the car somewhere necessary. I hope that I'm providing value for your time, but you really need to look at your time and your life as important. You only have one life. You don't even know how long you have on this earth. So spending 40 years of your life in a crappy job that you hate and commuting 2 hours a day, is it really worth it in order to maybe enjoy 10 to 20 years on a meager retirement because you didn't save properly and you didn't have the tools you needed to equip yourself to even enjoy it? I don't think so. I like the idea of being able to enjoy my life when I'm living it and when I'm young and not being a slave to somebody else and somebody else telling me where to go and what to do. And also not buying into the fact that even though pretty much everyone I know has big fancy houses and nice cars and buys brand new clothes and gets their nails done and all of those things, I'm not judging them for that. That's completely their choice, but that doesn't really bring me happiness. I would be happy living in a tiny home in the middle of nowhere, wearing thrift store clothes, which I already do half of the time, most of the time. Almost everything I have is thrift store clothes. That makes me perfectly happy. Those things do not bring me happiness. Those material things do not bring me happiness. There are things that I do think is worth the cost that other people might not. For example, our dog. I was so against getting a dog for so many years, and my husband and my daughters wanted a dog, and we started looking, and I started researching because I'm a researcher and I research everything to death. And I thought, okay, well, if this is going to cost us a lot of money, of course the dog costs up front, and then you've got food, and then you've got vet bills and all of that. Speaking of which, and I'm going to go off on a quick tangent here, but I wanted to remind you, if you do have a pet of any kind, if you get pet insurance, I found it to be a financial lifesaver because pets really are expensive. And when they get sick or if they have an injury, it can be thousands of dollars if your pet needs surgery. So go to makingitpaytostay.com/pets, and you can get a special rate on Pets Best Pet Insurance. It's health insurance for pets. I tried a couple of them, and this seems to be the one with the most reasonable cost with the best benefits. So anyway, I think I spend $20 a month, but it covers so much more than I was spending the first year we had our dog Tucker. He's a golden doodle, by the way. I was spending more than that per year on his vet costs, just basic things, let alone anytime he got sick, like when he got Lyme disease and we had to give him medication and have him go back in for checkups, and it was just ridiculous. But this has saved us a lot of money already, and he's only 2 years old. So I highly recommend you get pet insurance if you have a pet. But going back to what makes me happy, he is so worth the cost. I would rather have him around, and he makes me laugh every single day. He snuggles me when my husband goes to work early in the morning before I wake up. He jumps on the bed and spoons me in bed. I probably walk more than I used to because of him, because he loves taking walks and he enjoys it so much. He gets so excited. He brings our family so much joy and happiness. It's priceless. It's literally priceless. So, spending $150 a month on his food and pet insurance and toys and whatever else he may need, that's about how much we end up spending. And it might seem a lot to you, but I know people who spend $150 a month on shoes or clothing or their hair even, or their nails. To me, those things don't make me any happier, but I do know that my dog makes me happier. So it's worth the cost to me. So if you can sit down and look at your expenses too and think, is this bringing me joy? Do I love this? Is this worth paying for? Is this worth working for? How many hours do I have to work to pay for this monthly expense or this yearly expense? Is it worth it? Then if it is, do it. You might have a sport or a hobby that you love and it's expensive and people think you're crazy. If it really brings you joy and makes you happy, do it. But if you're spending money on Netflix, Hulu, and whatever else, and you maybe watch 1 or 2 shows a month, or you know that you shouldn't be watching so much TV, you could be reading books for free from the library instead, cancel those subscriptions. If you're going and getting your nails done every 2 weeks at a salon, look on YouTube how to do it yourself. You can buy kits to do your own nails. A nail drill on Amazon is like $20 or $30. And acrylic or gel stuff is not much more. And if you love having your nails done, think about, well, maybe I could do it myself. What would it cost me to do it myself? Would it cost less if I was able to do that? So really think about those things. I know another area I used to spend a lot of money on was home decor. And I would go into Home Goods or TJ Maxx or Marshalls or any of those places and just start buying stuff and putting it up all over. And then I realized half of this stuff I don't even like, I don't even look at. Like, yes, it makes my house look good. And yes, I'm at home a lot, so it's very important to me what my home looks like on the inside. But a lot of it I really didn't need. Knickknacks and things like that, those don't make me happy. So I really started to think about what specific things in my home actually make me happy. And you know what I came up with? Zero clutter. And you know what else it helps me have do you know what else helps when you have zero clutter is cleaning. I can clean a lot faster when I don't have a lot of stuff that I need to clean. So it actually made me realize, okay, all of this stuff, it may look pretty and it might give me a little high when I buy it, but not having to clean it and really looking at it wasn't bringing me all that much joy once I had it. It's helped me to realize that I really don't need to keep going to those stores and buying new stuff for my house. Okay, so the next book I want you to read after you read Your Money or Your Life is The Simple Path to Wealth. This talks a lot about investing, and it finally simplifies investing for you. It is so straightforward. He goes over how much you should be putting in, what you should be putting it into, why you should be putting it into these low-cost index funds, which companies are best to use for them, and also how to start allocating your portfolio to more bonds and which bonds to go with as you get closer to retirement age so that you're taking on less risk. So that book literally finally clarified investing for me when I had read so many other books about it and I was really no much further along than when I had started. I read so many books about investments and thought maybe I had a good grasp on it, but it just really made me more confused and gave me analysis paralysis because there were so many choices and everyone seemed to think that their idea was the best one. But The Simple Path to Wealth is basically the Bible of financial independence. So definitely read that after you get your mindset right with your money or your life. If you read those two books, you'll be golden. I will probably put some other book recommendations in the show notes for you that you can read after that. But those are the kind of the pillars that I want you to start on. And podcasts, obviously you're listening to a podcast, so you probably like podcasts. There are some financial independence podcasts that I highly recommend as well that will really get you fired up and keep you going and keep that momentum, keep the motivation when it starts to wane, because it will. Trust me, you can be on fire for something for about, well, I don't know about you, but for me, it's about 3 months tops. I will be super interested in something for about 3 months. And then I find something else to get interested in, or I'm just not quite as excited about it. So I started subscribing to the ChooseFI podcast, Afford Anything podcast. And those are the two I think you should start with. Afford Anything is fantastic. It's hosted by Paula Pant, and she has the most beautiful, soothing, articulate voice. She literally, I listen to that podcast half of the time just because I love listening to her voice. I highly recommend that podcast, and she's super smart. She really knows what she's talking about. Her main source of investments is real estate. So she talks about that a lot. She just came out with a real estate investing course for beginners that looks fantastic. I probably won't be getting that because I'm not quite ready to get into real estate at this point, but probably in the future, I know we'll be adding some kind of rentals into our mix as well. We're just not at that point, but I highly recommend you check that out. And the ChooseFI podcast is another fantastic one. They go over all kinds of things. They talk about side hustles a little bit, but they talk about career hacking, college hacking. Some people don't like the word hacking, but I like it because it's like figuring out the best way to do something. And that's literally what makes me happy inside. I love problems and I love solving them, but I like solving them by figuring out the fastest, most efficient way of doing something, and easiest if possible. Sometimes easiest doesn't mean the best. In fact, often it doesn't. But if I know what the best is, the best way of getting somewhere or the best way of doing something, then I at least feel good about my choices, even if it's hard. So yeah, they talk about travel, credit cards, and meal planning, pretty much anything you can think of. Another one that's related to these two is called What's Up Next podcast. And I like this one because it's kind of a roundtable of different people brainstorming and giving their ideas on financial independence. And finally, my last one I would recommend is mainly for families. It's called House of F.I.R.E. And remember, F.I. stands for financial independence. It's called House of F.I., and they have a lot of good tips for families because let's face it, if you have kids, your date to financial independence is going to take a lot longer than a single or even a couple. It just is. Kids can be expensive. They don't have to be as expensive as some people, make them out to be. And you do not have to give your kids everything that everyone else is getting. Believe me, we don't. And our kids let us know about it every single day. But they still are expensive. You're still going to have expenses. Yes, they have tax credits, but I have to be honest with you, tax credits don't really cut it, especially for preteens, teenagers, especially once our daughters start driving. I know we're going to have a lot more expenses involved in that. But they have great advice for kids and investments for kids, how you can get your kids started early, how you can set up custodial accounts for them to give them a head start on life, and how you can hire your kids if you have a side hustle or a business, and how much you can pay them, and if they can use a Roth IRA for that, and how to go about doing that. So definitely check that out if you have a family or kids. If you don't, you're not going to get any more out of that podcast than you would from the other ones. So save your time. I'm all about saving time. So that's about it. Oh, no, it's not. I have 2 more quick tips for you if you really want to keep digging into this further. And I'm sure I'll be doing other podcasts on this topic as well in the future. Hopefully I'll get some guests on. But check out Facebook and search for the ChooseFI Facebook group or any other kind of financial independent groups and join them. There are literally dozens and dozens of helpful posts in those groups every single day that I come across. And I swear I learn something new, a new way of saving money, a new way of looking at money, a new way of investing money every single day in some of those groups. And Reddit also is a great place to look. There is a personal finance group in Reddit that I recommend. There are also some cool Reddits there's one called Poverty Finance. And most of the people in there are literally living in poverty. Like they're really, really poor. But you can get some fantastic information in there, and you can also give them some fantastic tips and help. A lot of people who are in poverty end up getting suckered into payday loans and things like that. And if you can help them out or give them tips or tricks that you know, and then get tips or tricks from them about, some super low cost, delicious dinner that you can feed your entire family for $3 for 3 or 4 meals, it's worth it. So, get in there and talk to people, see what people are talking about. Definitely a great place to check out. So I think that's about it, guys. Don't forget to check out the show notes. I will have everything I mentioned in this episode in the show notes for you. Links to the podcast, links to the books, links to the resources I mentioned, and probably a few others that I didn't mention in the show that I think will be helpful for you as well. So until next time, this is my side hustle. Hey there. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate us and review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite podcatcher service is located. We would really, really appreciate it. And if you want to be a guest on the show, be sure to head over to makingitpay.com/voicemail, where you can ask questions, leave tips, talk about what you want to hear, or apply to be a guest. Thanks so much.